Was it ever just an ordinary evening that suddenly turned into something unexpected? Here, I share true-to-life stories, the kind that could happen to anyone. Sometimes they're light and romantic, sometimes tense and unsettling. But that's what makes life real. So, get comfortable. My story begins on an ordinary evening that suddenly became a test. That day, I stayed late at work. Documents, calls, urgent tasks, everything piled up at once. By the time I packed my bag and left the office, darkness had already settled outside. I hadn't noticed how quickly time had passed until exhaustion hit me. A fine rain was falling and water splashed under my shoes with every step. My heels grew heavier and wetter with each block. I was hurrying home, longing for nothing more than to curl up under a blanket with a hot cup of tea. But the usual route would take too long, so I decided to do something I normally wouldn't: cut through the park. It was the shortest way home, but also the darkest. What would you do if you suddenly felt someone watching you in the dark? At first, I tried not to think about it. I told myself it was just a park, that nothing bad would happen. But the deeper I went, the thicker the darkness grew. The rustle of leaves under my feet sounded unnaturally loud, almost as if someone was walking right beside me. Every sound echoed in the emptiness. I quickened my pace, feeling that uneasy prickling on the back of my neck, the sense of being watched. When I turned around, there was no one. Just the empty path, dim streetlights, and the drizzle. Still, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, ahead of me, two figures stepped out of the shadows. Young men, standing directly in my way. I froze for a second, my legs suddenly heavy. A cold wave ran down my spine. Who were they? Why were they staring? They started moving toward me, never breaking eye contact. I gathered my courage and kept walking. My pulse roared in my ears. Their footsteps echoed behind me. Fear pushed me forward faster and faster until I finally saw the glow of the streetlights beyond the park. My apartment building was close now. I rushed inside, climbed the stairs, and slammed the door behind me. Only then did I realize I was trembling. Safe at last, but my heart still raced wildly. I stripped off my soaked clothes and stepped into the shower. Hot water washed over me like salvation, melting the tension from my body. The warmth soothed my nerves, and I stayed under the stream longer than usual, letting the fear dissolve. When I finally stepped out and put on a light robe, the one I always wore when I wasn't expecting anyone, I felt calm again. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, replaying the walk through the park in my mind. I was grateful nothing had happened. But just as I began to relax, the doorbell rang. I jumped. Who could it be this late? I hesitated, then asked quietly, "Who is it?" A familiar voice answered, "It's me, Chris, your neighbor." Relieved, I opened the door. Chris lived upstairs. We'd exchanged hellos a few times in the courtyard, a polite, slightly shy guy. He smiled awkwardly. "Is Mark home?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, he's working the night shift." He nodded, and for a brief moment, his eyes flicked over me before meeting mine again. I invited him in, maybe because the quiet of the apartment suddenly felt too heavy. "Come on," I said, "have some tea." We sat at the table, talking about work, neighbors, and how stressful life had been lately. The warmth of the tea and his calm presence slowly eased the tension of the evening. There was laughter, small talk, and that odd comfort that comes from unexpected company. Time passed unnoticed. When Chris finally stood to leave, there was a pause between us, the kind that says more than words. "Good night, Anna," he said softly. After he left, I sat alone for a long time, listening to the silence return. Inside me was a strange mix of guilt and relief, fear and warmth. What had happened tonight, or almost happened, I couldn't quite explain. But one thing I knew for sure: life never warns you when it's about to change.